Are you looking for better health but feel a little overwhelmed with it all, thinking there might be something missing? Maybe you're looking for action steps to take that get to the real root of the issue and actually move the needle in your health. Here on the Cornerstone Integrative Healing Podcast, we will share the link between our physical, emotional, and spiritual health, all while pointing you to the one and only true healer, Jesus. I'm Kari, Coody, your co-host. As a pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner, I spent 20 years in the traditional healthcare world, and it was definitely long enough to know there's a huge need for preventative healthcare and holistic healing. I'm excited to have conversations around these topics with my co-host and friend, Jenn.
Hey, I'm Jenn Patriarca. God gave me this desire to help others with natural healing a long time ago. With more than 20 years of experience in the functional nutrition field, God decided it was time to join forces. Kari and I are colleagues turned faithful partners in this mission God has put on our hearts. A mission for true healing, one that encompasses an integrative approach. With Jesus taking the lead, our aim is to point you toward Him as we help you peel back the layers. Through conversations, you can expect straightforward information on holistic health topics that include physical, emotional, and spiritual action steps that will create real change in your health, and honest conversations around the ups and downs that can come with healing. It's time to have joy in your life again and the energy to do all that God has called you to. Be sure to subscribe for new episodes every Monday. Hey, everyone, and welcome back. This is episode 18, and we're still on creating a strong health foundation that lasts. And today we're on our last episode on emotional health. And so we wanted to give you some tools and some practical things to really help you in your everyday life. I think, be aware of your emotions, but also maybe some tools to sort of help with the ebb and flow of the emotions, be present with the emotions, acknowledge the emotions, and just kind of give you some insight as to what God has shown us over the last 7 months.
That's right. 7 months today.
7 months today. Go ahead, Kari.
Yeah, I was just thinking about emotional health, and I know we have some listeners probably that just feel like emotions are messy, and I mean it's true, like they are, at times. But I just think, our prayer is that in this episode we can give you more practical tools just to help you maybe be more comfortable. If that is, I think God does help us to be more comfortable, but I know I like practical. And I just think more logically, I guess that's just how my brain works. And so I sort of, as I've shared in other episodes, kind of tried to steer away from emotional people, maybe emotions myself. But I think that was because it just seemed like a lot, and I think, and our hope is these practical tools help you to realize, okay, emotions are just part of life. We've talked about that and how God can use those. And so hopefully these tools can just help you to feel more comfortable with dealing with them, because that's why I didn't like them, because I didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't have any of the tools. So hopefully this episode can just help you feel a little bit more comfortable with things that show up, because we all have emotions every day. And some people probably do tend to be more on the emotional side than others. However, emotions are God-given. So we have to, look at them that way and not in a way of judgment. And we're going to talk about that in this episode.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think most people, when they think of emotions, they think maybe of like super dramatic people
right.
But it's usually in the sense of suppressing the emotions, or maybe not acknowledging the emotions. I think both suppressing, not acknowledging, and suppressing is where you do yourself a disservice. And so we really want to encourage you to just be present with whatever is coming up, acknowledge it, and pay attention, because not only I think God's working through our emotions, right?
Definitely.
Because I think it's, as Christians would say, it's a little bit of a heart posture too, how we respond to the emotions.
Yeah. And that's just a reminder, we were talking about paying compassionate attention to our emotions. And I think that just can bleed out into so many other different areas, as far as like our words matter over ourselves and other people. And so when we're constantly just feeling like shameful because we feel a certain way, gosh, that's just like so deep, so much deeper. And it really causes a lot of just I don't know what the right word is, like unrest,
Self
maybe.
self-judgment.
So yeah, I mean, it's just not a good path to go down. Let's put it that
No.
way, maybe, right? It just, our words do matter. And if we think everything God made is perfect, well, we're his creation too. And so if we constantly judge ourselves and are critical of ourselves, it just breeds discontentment and not being happy with ourselves. And God doesn't want that. It doesn't lead to good things. So I think that's first and foremost. You have to know that and believe that first.
I have a little bit of a story.
Yeah.
So I have to tell this story because I was just talking about with my therapist, and I think it is really, I think it just shines a light on this perfectly. So we went on vacation. The beginning of the vacation did not go as planned. So we missed our connection flight. We ended up having to spend the night in Philly. We were supposed to be in Aruba. And then we didn't get our luggage for a couple days. So we were a little out of sorts. So I'm walking on the beach. It's this beautiful beach. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I so stressed and worried about where our luggage is? Like, this is a first world problem. Like, I'm on this beach. It's a beautiful beach. And I just kept having this loop kind of, as I was walking down the beach. And so I kind of was talking to my therapist about it. And, basically what she brought up was that, it would have been fine if you would have been like, yeah, this sucks. We don't have our luggage. We missed a day, and you move on. She's like, but it was the piece of the self-judgment, right? I was judging myself for not moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of accepting where you are.
Right. But acknowledging it first, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
sometimes it's like we don't want to be there, so we don't acknowledge that we're there. Because we don't want to be there, and so we're not like accepting that we're there. If that makes sense.
That's exactly the point of that story is I was there, and
Yeah.
I guess I was in a beautiful place, but yes, it does,
Yeah.
and I think it would have taken, a Buddhist monk who meditates for 24 hours a day not to be upset, right?
Yeah.
To be in that situation. So I think anyway,
Yeah.
the self-acceptance is a big piece. But as Kari was pointing out, just being patient with the process too, I think is another thing that I've learned, right? Just to be patient in the process. Like we want to get from A to B to C like
Right.
yesterday,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only physically, emotionally, spiritually, but it's in that process, right, where the magic happens. And so in paying compassionate attention to your emotions and maybe, with a really open mind, like there's no perfectionism or shame or
Mm-hmm.
self-judgment. And as much as you can, just accepting and being patient where you are and being in the process. Because really, this is where God has you and God wants you, and you might miss what
Yeah.
he's trying to show you.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we're human. So, it's like Paul said, like, I want to do one thing, but I do the other.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's probably going to be the case until we go to heaven, because there's no perfection here on earth from anyone. So I think just giving ourselves some slack and realizing like God doesn't, he has so much grace for us and mercy for us. And kind of before we move into like the practical, giving you some tools, I'm actually rereading that Ann Voskamp book called Waymaker. I just was like, this book is so good, I've got to reread it. It was just talking about emotions, and so I wanted to share this little sentence with you. It says, "All emotion is the language of the soul's motion, the language of the soul's movement toward God." And in that book, it talks about how we kind of have to turn our sails toward the spirit and kind of to go with it, right? Go in the direction of the Lord. And I think emotions are ways that he helps us to change our direction, right? I mean, it's there, but we have to choose to go in his direction versus our own. So emotions aren't a bad thing. They're part of life, and I think they're God-given too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, on that same note, as we are focusing sort of on the language or the motion of the soul, I think it's also, as we talked about, we always are looking maybe ahead or where we want to be instead of where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that, Father Thomas Keating had this quote. He was a beautiful monk who I loved. And he said, the greatest accomplishment in life is to be what we are, which is God's idea of what he wanted us to be when he brought us into being.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's so beautiful because therein lies the growth.
Yeah. Right. Because he brings that. We don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now to live that out every day, imperfectly, right?
Right. But I think that's why we have community. I know we talk a
Yeah.
lot about community on this. And for me, community has been big.
Yeah.
And I think the other tools like journaling and, for me is a communication with God almost. And I think in that communication with the community, with our God, as Kari has said before too, just in sharing, I think there's just power in, just being vulnerable and being heard.
Yeah. And we do talk about that in previous episodes. So if you're just hopping in on this episode, you want to go back and listen to the whole series.
For sure.
Because they do kind of build on each other. But I do think as far as emotions go and just thinking practically about them, a lot of times it is about paying attention because sometimes like I would just think about for myself, okay, I always just kind of try to avoid like the messy or emotions. And so I would sort of dismiss or miss some of the smaller lead up to like a bigger blow up, if that makes sense. It's like,
Sure.
right. And so now I've learned, okay, if something comes up, I need to pray about it. I need to journal about it. I need to be aware of it and sit with it. And then that changed everything for me, truly, because it's like, it's an ongoing process versus just a build up to a bigger thing. And then I don't even want to say it's dealt with because honestly, it's not a lot of times in those bigger blow ups, but yeah, it is paying attention on a daily basis to what comes up because there's always something behind that. And it really does go back to your heart or your soul, right? It kind of is linked back to that. So that's sort of our first tool, I guess, is paying attention. If that can be a tool, if there's other tools within that one thing, right?
Yeah, we talked about this a lot, Kari and I, is really being aware of those subtle emotions, which we may not always have to bring up with the other person, but we at least need to acknowledge with ourselves. Maybe someone said something to you and you were like, well, that was kind of snarky. Right. Or my son who's 18, kind of gives me some back talk. And sometimes, I have to connect with Jesus, not to give some back talk back, but what I can do is acknowledge it to myself in the sense of saying, and this is small, right? But what I'm saying is this is what leads up to a big blow up over time. And so if I can even to myself say, wow, he shouldn't have really said that, and kind of say what I want to say to him to myself, right?
Yeah.
Like he shouldn't have talked to you that way. That was not very kind. I know that you were hurt. He didn't mean it, not even talking myself out of it, but just acknowledging it to myself.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where journaling can come in. That's where talking to someone else can come in, a friend, just somebody you're in community with, or a counselor or therapist. I think there's all of those can be used, and they probably all should be used at certain times in your journey or maybe ongoing. But I do think
that's my favorite.
What now?
Sorry, tapping.
Oh yeah. Okay. You want to talk about that? That's definitely a tool you can use.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I just feel like in the moment it's so accessible.
Yeah. We've talked about this before too on cannot remember what episode that was, but we went into a little bit more detail on tapping, and I'll put that episode in the show notes because forgive me, I can't remember the episode number, but we have a whole free resource on that. And it is just a tool. And Jenn, you can talk more about, because you use it more than I do, but it is really good to use in the moment to help you move through and kind of process emotions.
Yeah, the limbic system needs to move through the emotion so it doesn't get stored as sort of a trauma or, a traumatic memory. And I think it's just a really good tool to help you move through the emotion and to be really accepting of yourself in that emotion. I mean, one of the statements, the main statement is, even though I have this stress, frustration, I totally and completely accept myself, which in and of itself, I think everybody could use every day.
Right. And it is
But
really
yes,
neat. Sorry.
go ahead. No, you go.
That it does use like touch, because that was the next thing I was going to mention, is something called somatic exercises. And that just means using touch, exercises that use touch on your body. So if you think about when an emotion comes up, a lot of times it's like we're triggered, right? And so it automatically makes our body feel not safe. And so that means that the nervous system has to respond to that, because the nervous system it's just wired for survival. And so it's constantly scanning to see if we're safe. And even if in our mind we know that we're safe, we can't really talk ourselves out of that sometimes. And so using these somatic exercises can really help to bring us back down to where our body does feel safe. And so this is just really simply using touch on your body to help your nervous system come back down, because your nervous system, it's, if you want to access it in the highest percentages, 80% is touch, right? And so we can use that's body to brain, versus using brain to body, which is something like counseling or talking it out or something like that. And really both, they should be used together. But if you want to calm your nervous system down quickly, you're going to do that with touch. And I would include breathing in that.
Sensation.
Yeah. So
Not
breathing,
necessarily touch, any sensation, really.
yeah, that's true. Breathing is probably the fastest way too. Because whenever we're feeling stressed or our nervous system is activated, we do tend to take shorter breaths in our chest. And so just trying to move that down to deeper breaths from your belly is really, it works really, really well. I mean, that's why they tell you during childbirth to breathe. And if you're in a lot of pain, to breathe. It does signal your body to safety the quickest. But using other types of touch techniques, which one do you like best, Jenn?
Honestly, I was just thinking about that. I at night, sometimes I will feel like my nervous system is heightened or kind of buzzing. And I think a lot of people come home and they probably have a drink or two, right? To kind of calm down that nervous system or the stress. But one of the somatic things that I'll use is literally just rubbing. So, I did it before. For those that can't see the video. It's literally just kind of like rubbing your shoulders and rubbing, or you can do a self hub. You actually put it's your right hand under your left armpit, and then your left hand right on top of your shoulder, and you kind of squeeze it. It sounds kind of corny, I know, but it's almost like giving yourself a hug, and it instantly changes my nervous system. I don't feel like I'm buzzing. I don't feel as activated. And as Kari said, that's because 80% of our nervous system is what they call afferent. So that means it's responding to outside information from the nervous system to the brain, versus top down, brain to nervous system, or brain is the nervous system, but brain to body.
Yeah.
And so, or the butterfly, I'll use the butterfly very often. So I just cross my hands across my chest and just tap alternating hands. And this quickly, because of the rhythmic motion, tells the brain that you're safe.
Yeah, I like both of those. I also just like putting my hand right here and just patting my chest. That's kind of along the same lines as the butterfly hug. But, I know we've talked about this before, Jenn, but it's just, as I was learning more about this, it's like, this is what we do to babies, right? And in our meeting on Monday, actually, our practitioner meeting that we go over client cases, Hannah was saying that babies are actually born without a parasympathetic nervous system, like the ability to kind of, have both and then be regulated. And so it just
for those that don't know, let me interrupt you. Just so you don't know, the parasympathetics is your rest and digest. Yeah. It's your calming side of your nervous system.
Yes. Thank you for that. So yes. So they're sympathetic and parasympathetic. And so babies are not born with that side of their nervous system yet. So that's why they need so much touch and to be close. And it's just, wow, that's so cool. I didn't know that. So it just makes a lot of sense. So honestly, we have to baby ourselves sometimes, which sounds crazy, but I promise you, try this. It works. I mean, you can do these things anywhere, truly. You don't, and that's what I really like about them. They, first of all, they work, but second of all, you don't have to take like a whole 30-minute time out, if you're feeling
Right.
stressed throughout the day, which
Right.
is great. Maybe you can go for a walk. Maybe you have time to do that, or you can take a little rest on the couch, and do some deep breathing or whatever. Those are all great too, but this is, sometimes that's just not possible. So we would challenge you to try these things because if we're constantly staying in that activated part of our nervous system, that's what leads to so many physical issues. And it's really because we just have all of this energy that's not being able to get out. And so it just
Right.
basically drains our body of
Yeah.
minerals and energy and all the things. So
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Most people don't know that. You can even just shake. Like
yeah,
sometimes if you feel super nervous or you can literally just shake and you're getting that survival energy out of the
yeah.
body.
Because
Um,
if our body doesn't feel safe, it has to mount a response, which, it doesn't know the difference between what doesn't feel safe. So it's trying to get you ready to run from something. But a lot of times we're not needing to run from something. So we have to get that energy out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's super key. That's probably my top tool, honestly. Along with obviously working through it, journaling, praying, that kind of stuff. But what is your next favorite tool when you think about
So
emotion?
what I was going to say is, people are probably thinking we didn't even talk about prayer. And I think prayer is something that we need to do to prevent us to get to that point of
Yeah.
kind of being activated exhaustion. Not that we always will, but I think as the Bible says, in renewing our mind, what we're doing is manifesting our new life in Christ. Kari, you talked about walking in the Spirit. And so if we renew our mind on a very regular basis, daily for me, twice a day, 3 times a day, we are, renewing is going back to the original position after the interruption. And the stress, the anger, the frustration is an interruption in our walking in the Spirit. And
Yeah.
so I think just renewing our mind and resuming our original position with Christ. And that, it says in 2 Timothy 1:7, I have not been given a spirit of fear,
Yeah.
but I have power and of love and of a sound mind. And
Amen.
so I think doing that on a daily basis, that verse for me has been immensely helpful. So what I was going
Yeah.
to say is just prayer and renewing my mind very regularly.
Yeah, and I love that. And we did talk a lot more about prayer in the previous like 2 episodes back, I believe.
Yes.
And that does go back to make me think about the quote I shared from that book. It's like it does all go back to our heart or soul. Because that's a lot of times emotions are it kind of almost reflecting the light back, or like the mirror back on us, to say like, what is it that we're believing that's false, basically. Um, because a lot of times it is true, not always, but sometimes. And I think there is a lot of self-reflection that needs to come, when we want, we have this emotional, an emotion come up. I think it's always good to have self-reflection, but I do think it has to start with, accepting where we are and not being critical of ourselves. A lot of times we can't have self-reflection because we don't have that first.
It's
We can't
very
have true
true.
self-reflection if we're constantly criticizing ourselves.
That's true. And I think that's why I said, in the immediate tools that we're talking about, I think what we talk about, the somatic exercises, the
Mhm.
tapping are really good. But to prevent yourself you know, is just renewing the mind on a daily
Yeah,
basis, because that's your foundation.
for sure.
And I think, I know it's sort of trite, but I think the gratitude piece is super important too, because that's a really big piece of renewing our mind. It
Yeah.
puts us in a mindset of God's truths, which,
Yeah.
focusing on what is lovely, what is good, um,
Mhm.
and I think that is it's another kind of technique, if you will, that I like to use a lot with people, which is heart math. And that's really it's breathing into your heart. And we've talked about this before, focusing on your heart space, touching. I like to, like Kari said, just kind of pat my heart. But in that, you are focusing on gratitude, joy, love. And I think even though it's talked a lot about, they're
is so much value in making it a daily practice.
Yeah. And this is a way of life. A lot of the things that we've talked about in this series, it is learning how to live a different way because the world is not pointing you in this direction. It's telling you can do everything in your own strength and you don't need to slow down. You need to speed up, actually. It's like all this is the opposite way of the world. So yeah, this is a different way of living. And so I hope no matter where you're at, you can gain something from the things that we've shared in this series so far and in this episode in particular. I just love that it is truly like we're all on different walks, yet God intersects those all the time. And so that's why we're meant to live in community. And I just don't think we understand the power of sharing something we're struggling with somebody else. And we talked a lot about this, but it when things come up, and I agree. I mean, we can't always have resolution with somebody if an emotion or something comes up between, two people. But I think the more that we can, the better, right? I mean, God uses that. And so there was actually this study done that somebody that was struggling with something hard just spoke it into a tape recorder. And there was just a lot of positivity that came from just that. And so just sharing with someone else and voicing what you feel is kind of trying to bubble to the surface. There's a lot of power in that. So don't neglect that. I know we're sharing tools that you can use, basically on yourself and kind of to help you quote, deal with things that come up, but you can only do that so much if you haven't went to the person that things are coming up with, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
but as I mentioned, I mean, even if you can't, sometimes it's not able to
and I get
yourself.
That.
You could acknowledge it to yourself with God.
For sure. He uses that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of round it out, I was looking about, verses that speak to this, and it took me to the Philippians, it was Matthew 22. It's just talking about how he commands us to love him and love others, God does, and that he gave us human emotions to prompt us to do something. And we've kind of shared a little bit about what that might look like. But emotions are there to show us the way a lot of times, show us the way, his way and the way that we might need to repent from or go to somebody else with and kind of have that conversation or, it really does. But a lot of times we just push them down, and that's what we're saying you don't need to do. So there's a lot of unrest that comes with that. Even if it's subtle, it does build over time. And so I think it's so important on a daily basis to try more and more to be to pay attention and to pray about these things and ask God to reveal them to us. But then we have to take action. If we're praying for him to do that, then we have to do our part too. It goes both ways. And so we hope that you are encouraged, equipped with the tools, and that you feel a little bit more comfortable with emotions that might come up and that maybe makes a little bit more sense, and you can pay more compassion and attention to yourself, because that was our goal. Jenn, any last thoughts?
I just had one more quick, something that I use often, tool, and I don't want to miss this one. And I know I'm kind of throwing it in there. I think grounding, being outside against the earth. I had a friend that was super upset, and she just went outside and watched a movie on the grass, literally put a blanket down, watched a movie. And 2 hours later, she said she felt like a different person.
Yeah. Well, maybe you don't have time to watch a movie. Just go outside.
Yeah. Put your feet in the grass.
Just go outside, put your feet in the grass, go for a walk. The more that we can be out in nature, the better. But I do think there's something really there's a lot of science to it. There's just a lot of comfort to it, just to put your bare feet on the grass,
Right.
Something as simple as that. No, I love that. Thank you. We forgot to mention that. And there are others certainly, and this isn't like comprehensive, but we just wanted to share some things that we feel like God was prompting us to and things that we've used. And so we would love for this to be a conversation. If there's something that a
Yes.
tool that we missed, please let us know.
We
Send
would
us
love
the
to hear
email.
what you use.
Yes.
Yeah, we would love to, if there's something that we didn't talk about that you use often, or something that would be helpful for others, let us know so we can share it.
For sure. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to continue this series and move on to the physical and the last kind of part of the series. So join us for the next episode, and we'll see you on that one.